message will be short. I know that before the church service began, Pastor Brownfield said, don't worry about time for special programs. We usually end at 12:15, and we're at 12:17. And then last week, Mrs. Charles, she asked me to speak the sermonette, and she said, and then I asked her, how much time should I have? And how should I speak for? She said, 10 minutes. So I said, okay, I will try to do that. So I promise you, it will not be 10 minutes. It'll be 15. I have to go a little bit over. I apologize. So I hope you can bear with me for 15 more minutes, and then we'll end this church service together. All right. Well, let's pray together, and we'll begin. Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for bringing us together, that we could just come together as a family of believers to sit, to listen to wonderful music, and now to be able to just hear what you have to say for us. And Father, you know that even though I have prepared some words here, Father, we pray that you would clear my lips and my body of any impurities, and that this message will become yours, and that whatever words will change, and that would be exactly what you want your people to hear. We pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen. So high school was not a really fun time for me. Going through high school, it was just kind of, going through public school, it really didn't do much for my spiritual life. It was just one of those things. And so going to church was really just about friendships. I went for friends, and if I had a choice, I probably wouldn't have gone. I would have probably stayed at home if my parents would have let me. But that's really all it was. And so when I look back at the reasons of why I didn't have much of a spiritual life, it's because spiritual things weren't really a reality for me. It just didn't seem real. It was just some fantasy that people talked about, but it really wasn't much of anything. And so it seemed that my parents went to church just because it was something to be a part of. For them as Korean immigrants, it was just a place where they can be Korean and be with Korean people and eat Korean food and speak in Korean. And it was a break from the rest of the world. And so as I began to see that, for me, it just seemed like church was just that. It was a place to be a part of community. It was and the idea of religion just became something that people just wanted to. They needed to have something to hope for in the world. And so they found church. They wanted to find something to put their blames on, and they found church. And they wanted to find something that they could just use to explain the oddities of life. And that ended up becoming church. And so for me, growing up, coincidence and God and social status were all pretty much the same thing. And so when I think of Hawaiian Mission Academy and my role here, it's to provide an educational environment where students can not only learn life skills through their content areas, but to be presented with real opportunities to understand who God is and to see the evidences of God's presence in their lives. Now, I don't believe in consequences. I don't believe that things happen randomly and that things do happen for a reason. It's just that we don't always see the bigger picture. In Deuteronomy 29:29, it states that the secret things belong to the Lord, but to us, whatever He gives to us is ours. And then also in Isaiah 55:8-9, he talks about how His ways are higher than our ways. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. And so no matter what, there are things that are just unexplainable in this earth. And for me, that was a really, really big, troubling thing. And these verses really solved a big issue in my life. For me, I thought, if I were to ever believe in spiritual things, if I were to ever believe that there is a God in this world, I needed to understand everything. I needed to have the answers to life's questions. I needed to understand that question of, well, if God is so great, can He build a rock that's so big that even He can't live? I needed to understand all of that. And if I didn't have those answers, then it wasn't enough for me to say, I'm going to believe in it. And so when I found these verses, it was interesting that everything cleared up. It was in that, for me, like I said, I had to have everything. I need to understand. I had to know everything. And when I learned through these verses that I don't actually have to know everything. I don't actually have to understand all of life's mysteries. And when I realized that, it was like a burden was lifted off my shoulders and off of my head. I didn't have to have the answers. And because of that, it actually allowed me to begin to have faith in God. So the next difficulty as I began to grow, unfortunately, was church itself. It's something that, there's an interesting thing that we all talk about when someone comes into the church. There's that roller coaster experience. They experience these new highs and they're like, yes, I'm on fire for the Lord, and they're just ready and they're praying, and they're like, I gotta learn everything. And And for some reason, it's almost like the people in the church are the ones that say, it'll pass. You'll get over it in time. And isn't that such a sad idea? That we almost, as a church, want to diminish someone's ability to just enjoy the Lord and to have that kind of a love. And so that's what happens. And so as these new Christians come into the church, they begin to see the inconsistencies. They start seeing the imperfections, and then they get kind of jaded, and then the church responds and says, yes, now you're one of us. You understand the struggles. And it's such a weird and sad thought, right? You know, even when my wife was coming into the church and she got baptized, she was going to go to graduate school, and she was going to go to Loma Linda, she said, I will only go to an Adventist institution. I want to learn only from Adventists. I want to see how they marry the professional life and the spiritual life. And unfortunately, I had to have that somber conversation with her. I said, please don't have too high of expectations of Loma Linda University. Even though it's Adventist, sometimes there are things that are not so Adventist, even at our Adventist institutions. And it was so sad that I had to say that, because unfortunately that's where our church is. And you see, these are the very things that for our young people here, and for even for our adults out here, these are the things that become frustrating. And these are the things that we see, the things that should be, but aren't. And as a result, our spiritual lives are just jaded. They're sad and depressed, and we're angry, even though we want to believe in God. And we say, why is it that this is this? Why is our church organization doing this? Why are they fighting about this? And that becomes our church experience. You know, and so what ends up happening, I believe, unfortunately, is sometimes as we struggle through this, and as we see all these different things, and as our jadedness grows, we stop being Christians, and we just start acting like Christians. We know how to act, we know what to say, we know how to sit properly, we know how to kneel and pray, and even if a prayer is 10 minutes long, we know, okay, we'll still be respectful, we can make it, you know, we learn all these traits of how to be a good Christian. But we're not always fully Christian anymore, or we've kind of lost that little spirit or that spark. And then we come to church and we start to get to know people, and we find, hey, there's more people who are kind of like me. We just kind of play the part of Christians. Sometimes we get involved in ministries, sometimes we're up to the pulpit, sometimes we help out with potluck, and we just do the responsibilities that a good Christian Adventist person would do. But is it really that real part of your life or our lives? And these are the things that are for our young people. As I see them and I see the questions that they ask, the question then becomes, why should we even bother with this? Why go through all this craziness to believe in something that doesn't really seem to bring that much joy and happiness to the people around them? Why? Let's turn in our Bibles to James chapter 1. James chapter 1. Verse 19, we're going to read it until 25. It says this, James chapter 1. Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath. For the wrath of man worketh not the righteousness of God. Wherefore, lay apart all filthiness and superfluity of naughtiness, and receive the meekness and the engrafted word which is able to save your souls. But be ye doers of the word, and not hearers only, deceiving your own selves. For if any be a hearer of the word, and not a doer, he is like unto a man beholding his natural face in a glass. For he beholdeth himself, and goes his way, and straightforward forgetteth what manner of man he was. But whoso looketh into the perfect law of liberty, and continueth therein, he being not a forgetful hearer, but a doer of the work, this man shall be blessed in his deed. As much as we want to blame the church, and as much as we want to blame the organization, and hopefully not the pastor, because Pastor Brown feels amazing. So, and as we go through these things, you know, people start to say, well, it's because of these things that my spiritual life can't grow. It's because this ministry is not operating the way that it is. It's because that's why I can't grow. I can't be the full Christian that I should be. But really, as we just read in James, it's just an excuse. We deceive ourselves if we are just a hearer and not a doer, regardless of the people around us. And as much as we know these things, we've heard messages upon messages about hearers and doers, and not just being a hearer and being a doer. We've heard these things. We've read these verses maybe not millions, many, many times. And yet, there's still that issue. This is what Mrs. White says in Steps to Christ. Obedience, the service and allegiance of love, is the true sign of discipleship. Instead of releasing man from obedience, it is faith, and faith only, that makes us partakers of the grace of Christ, which enables us to render obedience. We do not earn salvation by our obedience, for salvation is the free gift of God to be received by faith, but obedience is the fruit of faith. She says that obedience is a direct byproduct of faith. And so the question then becomes, how do we grow faith? How do we attain faith? How do we have it? Is it like a video game where if we accomplish certain missions and accomplish certain tasks, then we'll get to level number 2 and level number 10, level green or diamond, I don't know, whatever the game's status is. Is that what happens with our faith? If we do this checklist, we will grow. No, of course not. So this is what she continues to say in Steps to Christ. Christ changes the heart. He abides in your heart by faith. You are to maintain this connection with Christ by faith and the continual surrender of your will to Him. And so long as you do this, He will work in you to will and to do according to His good pleasure. Then, with Christ working in you, you will manifest the same Spirit and do the same works. Works of righteousness, obedience. Oftentimes when we think of spiritual work or growing faith, we think of how many times are we praying? Are we praying before each meal? Are we praying when we wake up and before we go to bed? We think of, oh, I should pick up my Bible and read a couple verses a couple times a week. I should read a couple devotional books here and there, like a couple times a week. And we think, if we do this, then we will grow. Mrs. White says that Christ changes the heart. It is His doing, but we have to maintain the connection. That's our work to do. And so the work that we have to focus on is the continual surrender of our will to God. And if we do that, we will manifest the same Spirit of God and do those good works. But it sounds so simple, and yet many of us are so unsuccessful at doing it. And unfortunately for some of us too, we may not even fully understand what it means to surrender. What does that mean? It's such a cliche term. Surrender your life to God. Okay, now what? You know, I mean, it just becomes such this weird, yay, Christian cliche statement. Give your life to Jesus. Done. I don't know what now. And so this is what Ms. White says. I like what she says. This is also in Steps to Christ. She says this: many are inquiring, how am I to make a surrender of myself to God? You desire to give yourself to Him, but you are weak in moral power, in slavery to doubt, and controlled by the habits of your life of sin. Your promises and resolutions are like ropes of sand. You cannot control your thoughts, your impulses, your actions. The knowledge of your broken promises and forfeited pledges weakens your confidence in your own sincerity and causes you to feel that God cannot accept you. But you need not despair. What you need to understand is the true force of the will. This is the governing power in the nature of man, the power of decision or of choice. Everything depends on the right action of the will. The power of choice God has given to men. It is theirs to exercise. You cannot change your heart. You cannot of yourself give God its affections. But you can choose to serve Him. You can give Him your will. He will then work in you to will and to do according to His good pleasure. Thus your whole nature will be brought under the control of the Spirit of Christ. Your affections will be centered upon Him. Your thoughts will be in harmony with Him. What surrendering your will means is simply this. I choose, you say this essentially, I choose to serve you today. Though I have the power to choose my own life, choose it for me. Help me to make the decisions today that will align me with your will. And it's simple, you know, it's something so silly, but that is just as simple as it is. When I first had that conversion experience, that's what I faced. I faced that whole thing of, you know, they asked the question, have you ever given your life to God? I guess not. What do I do? They're like, just do it. I'm like, okay, what does that even mean? They said, well, say it, pray it, and then actually start to believe in it. And it was so simple and so silly, like, it sounded almost very like voodoo-ish, like, oh, I'll say it and it'll come true. But yet, unexplainable things start to happen. And my life began to change from just that simple statement that was made over and over. And that was it. So when the Bible states that by beholding we become changed, this is what it means. That when we take the time to say, I will behold Christ, I will try to integrate him into my life, we naturally begin to change in that way. And that's all it really is. You know, but we struggle with that. It's such an interesting thing that we surrender our will to God, and I believe we all do. But sometimes it's not every day. Sometimes it's only when it's convenient. And sometimes we ask ourselves, wait, why am I surrendering my will when you're the one who gave it to me? If you gave it to me and I get to do things, why should I give it back to you? And yet that's what he's asking. It's such a weird thing. And so in our mind we say, well, if you've given me will and I get to do this, then I'll do it in my way. And of course, God, you're going to bless me because you gave me my will, right? And yet we find ourselves in that problem. And I think you get the point. I know we're running short on time. So let me end on this. She ends the chapter in Steps to Christ called Consecration in this way. She says, desires for goodness and holiness are right as far as they go. But if you stop here, they will avail nothing. Many will be lost while hoping and desiring to be Christians. They do not come to the point of yielding the will to God. They do not now choose to be Christians. Through the right exercise of the will, an entire change may be made in your life. By yielding up your will to Christ, you ally yourself with a power that is above all principalities and powers. You will have strength from above to hold you steadfast. And thus, through constant surrender to God, you will be enabled to live the new life, even the life of faith. So the question for us is this. What are we? And who are we? Are we just playing the role of a Christian? Are we just acting like our parents taught us to act? Are we acting like people around us are acting? Or is it actually something that is a part of our life? Are we actually Christians? Is it an outpouring of our spirit to want to do these things? Or are we just checkmarking things off our list to say, I'm a good Christian. I'm better than some other people in the church, so I'm okay. Is that it? And so for us, and especially for our young people, if we are to ever hasten the Lord's return, we need to be steadfast in who we are as Christians. Are we actually Christians? Because if we do that for our young people, they'll be able to see that it's actually real. They'll be able to see that it's something that is attainable. That's something to shoot for. Because now they struggle with that. Is this real? Is this not real? Is this just a social club? Or is this something that is life-changing? And so I ask of you, and I plead with you, even for my own life, as this is a message even for me too, that we need to stop acting like Christians and to be Christians. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for everything that you've done in our life. That all the blessing and all the miracles that you've done for us to be sitting here today is a miracle. There are many who grew up the same way we did and who are not here. For some reason, we're here. And we thank you for what you've done in our lives to remind us of who we are and who we want to be. And so we pray that you would work with us and continue to remind us of what we can do with you in our life and how our young people can grow into a relationship with you if they just need a model. They just need an example sometimes. And so we pray that you would hide our imperfections. You would hide our impurities, that we may be able to just hide behind you. And that as we devote more of our life to you, that you would cleanse us of all those things. You would help us to overcome those things, that we can be exactly who you want us to be, and that you'll come soon. We pray all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.